The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we think if we criminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Oh, yes. Thanks very much. Good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome back. I hope you had yourselves a great three-day weekend. It is Tuesday, November 13th, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I hope you're all having a great day. I know that marijuana is legal now in Washington State and Colorado, and that has us all feeling pretty good, including my co-host here, Brian the Red, who's hanging out here on mic number 2. Hey, Brian.
Oh, yeah, man. It is legal. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wanted to give you big thanks, big props for hosting and engineering the election night coverage last Tuesday, a week ago.
It was a big chair to fill, man. I'm telling you. That's you got so much multitasking going on there.
It's amazing, isn't it?
I thought I was, decent at computers.
Can you believe it's a week ago now that we legalized marijuana in 2 states?
I actually, it's fully sunk in. For me anyway, it's sunk in that it's legal in 2 states. Unfortunately, not our state, but
we'll get there.
We're, they're pushing at the legislature, here in town. I mean, here in Oregon. So we'll see what erupts before the next election year.
Gotcha. We got other good news too in with respect to your skateboarding stuff. Why don't you tell people about this? Can you?
I skateboard like everywhere because basically I'm a broke. SOB. But, and to get around, I use the same boards. And while we were down in San Francisco for the High Times Medical Cannabis Cup this summer, which National Cannabis Coalition was so glad, so nice to sponsor us going down there. Anyway, I met up with John, the president of Ganja Skateboards, and he was carrying around this longboard that was intended for actually not Danny Danko, but somebody else on the High Times crew. He ended up gifting me and Ganja John and Kaliko and Russ all a couple of decks. Actually, Russ is hanging up here.
So you're now sponsored by these guys.
I am now the official Oregon rep for Ganja Skateboards. So if you're looking for some cool skateboards here in Oregon, Brian at ganjaskateboards.com. I can get you some info, and if you're a store, I can get you some wholesale info. So.
That's awesome news. Well, we got that, plus our regular hemp headlines, what's happening after legalization, a lot of stuff to have to cover on today's show. Also, we're going to take a look at my thoughts on which states will legalize next. All that more coming up on The Russ Belville Show.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa. Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
Which of you are ready to admit to having used marijuana in the past? And they want us to go around and ask each of you. Senator Kerry, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Senator Edwards?
Yes.
Senator Lieberman?
I have a reputation for giving unpopular answers at Democratic debates. I never use marijuana. Sorry.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Senator.
Smoke a little pot, drink a little wine. Everything will be just fine. Smoke a little pot, drink a little wine. Everything will be just fine.
Now it's time for our 420 headline news with our news editor, Carrie Gallagher. Carrie is off today. I'm Russ Belville with the news. The new documentary Code of the West is premiering Friday at Portland's Clinton Street Theater. This new film by Rebecca Richmond Cohen is premiering this Friday at the Clinton Street Theater in Portland, Oregon at 9 p.m. and chronicles the rise and fall of the Montana medical marijuana industry and profiles Tom Daubert, a prior guest on our show, Chris Lindsay, Chris Williams, and Richard Floor, the medical marijuana grower who recently died in prison. We are honored to have Rebecca as a guest on our show this Thursday to promote the screening. We may also be able to host a live remote from the Clinton Street Theater featuring Q&A with the director and Portland Cannabis Examiner Jennifer Alexander, as well as LEAP speaker Shelley Fox-Loken and others. Rebecca has begun a Kickstarter campaign to fund the editing and promotion of the latest version of the film, which includes updates on the Tom Daubert and Chris Williams cases. Code of the West ended with a postscript about one of its main characters, Tom Daubert, noting that the chief architect of the state's medical marijuana law had rejected a plea bargain with the federal government that would have resulted in at least 10 years in prison. He was still awaiting his fate. We now know it. In September, Daubert received 5 years probation. Chris Williams was a partner in Montana Cannabis, one of the largest caregivers in the state, and among the medical marijuana businesses raided by federal authorities in March of 2011. Williams opted out of a plea bargain, saying, quote, "This is nothing more than slavery and completely disregards my rights as a citizen of the United States of America. I have declined the offer," end quote. A jury has convicted him, and he now faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 80 years in prison. He has requested a retrial. From the Colorado Independent, Colorado representatives seeking exemption from federal pot prohibition laws, Scott Kurzgod reporting. In the wake of the week's recent historic vote to legalize marijuana in Colorado, the state's 3 Democratic U.S. House members are drafting legislation aimed at easing the tension between the new state law and long-standing federal prohibition of the drug. Congressional staffers told The Independent that Colorado Representatives Diana DeGette, Earl Perlmutter, and Jared Polis are working independently and together on bills that would exempt states where pot has been legalized from the Controlled Substances Act. DeGette Chief of Staff Lisa Cohen told The Independent that proposals the representatives are working on would alter Section 903 of the Act to allow states to establish their own marijuana laws free from federal preemption. Colorado's Amendment 64 passed by a wide margin on Election Day. It legalizes adult use and possession here and would establish retail marijuana sales. From CBS Money Watch, Latin American leaders call for review of U.S. legal pot vote, Mexico City. A group of Latin American leaders declared Monday that votes by 2 U.S. states to legalize marijuana have important implications for efforts to quash drug smuggling, offering the first government reaction from a region increasingly frustrated with the U.S.-backed war on drugs. The declarations by the leaders of Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Costa Rica did not explicitly say they were considering weakening their government's efforts against marijuana smuggling. but it strongly implied the votes last week in Colorado and Washington would make enforcement of marijuana bans more difficult. The four called for the Organization of American States to study the impact of the Colorado and Washington votes and said the United Nations General Assembly should hold a special session on the prohibition of drugs by 2015 at the latest. And in Kentucky, from HuffPost parents, a Kentucky woman arrested after her children were photographed with marijuana plants and joints. According to WAVE television, a Kentucky mother-daughter duo was arrested this week after a local store reported photos of children appearing to smoke marijuana. Beth Hensley and Tracy Hensley were approached by police after employees at a Leslie County Rite Aid notified authorities when they saw the content of the images brought in on Friday. Quote, there were several children in pictures holding marijuana and had marijuana joints rolled up and was attempting to smoke them, end quote, said Leslie County Deputy Adrian Cornett. According to the Lexington Herald Leader, the children were boys. Cornett says one was 1-year-old and the other was between 3 and 5 years old. When authorities arrived at Beth Hensley's residence, they found 24 marijuana plants around her home. According to Wave, Beth Hensley admitted posing her young grandchildren for the pictures, but said it was all just a joke. Quote, it was just to show them later on in a picture album how crazy their grandma was. Beth Hensley's now charged with trafficking, possessing, and cultivating marijuana, and Tracy Hensley, the mother, is charged with endangering the welfare of a minor and unlawful transaction with a minor. And I'm Russ Belville. That's our 420 headline news for today, Tuesday, November 13th, 2012. When we come back, we go behind the headlines and look at the Seattle Police Department's guide to legal marijuana use.
What's happening, cool cats? This is Big Daddy, and I want you to cruise on over to the Funky Roller Rink. We'll be grooving all night long. Doors open at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, every Thursday night, right here on RadicalRuss.com.
Funky-licious.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
Said, hey, do you have a joint, kid? Sure would be a lot cooler if you did light it.
That's Sean Reefer and the Resident Valley Boys, here on our Daily Toker Tunes. And it's time for us now to go behind the headlines and take a deeper look at one of the stories affecting the marijuana culture. And today I want to take a look back at Seattle and Washington's I-502 because, of course, it passed by a wide margin, the widest margin of the marijuana legalization initiatives, over 10%, 55 to 45, plus a couple decimal points here and there. So in electoral politics, that's a pretty wide margin of support. And yet there were people that were against Seattle's I-502, and they issued a lot of scares. There was a lot of scaremongering going on about what would happen and how the police would react if we were to pass I-502. What would the cops do? What terrible things would happen? So today, the Seattle Police Department, through its community outreach blog, which is called the SPD Blotter, issued a Q&A post designed to inform city residents of their newly won right to possess marijuana. Now, some members of the cannabis community who opposed I-502 made all sorts of alarmist claims as to how the police would react after I-502's passage. This document, this SPD blotter, if it's truly reflective of the Seattle police policy henceforth, would seem to lay some of those fears to rest. One of the people that was against 502 was the campaign director for Sensible Washington. His name is Anthony Martinelli, and he actually called into our show to explain, as he had in many places and many times in print and in person, that if cops found you in possession of a legal ounce of marijuana, that would provide them the probable cause to search you for a greater illegal amount of marijuana. We heard this a number of times, that if you had less than an ounce, that would be the probable cause. The cops would need to search you to see if you had more than an ounce. You heard it here on the show when Martinelli called in hour 2. Well, this was also echoed by a lot of the commenters and a lot of the echo chamber that followed around the No on I-502 campaign. There was actually a commenter from the March Post named Sydney, and she had written this. With a per se DUID limit, cops will still be able to harass cannabis consumers nonstop, and you possessing your legal ounce will be enough cause for them to blood test you. And if you have that ounce, it likely means you're a smoker, and that means you'll almost surely be above the limit. So, is the possession of an ounce the probable cause the police need to harass you further? Apparently not in Seattle, because the Seattle Police Department blotter says this. In their question and answer, the question is, what happens if I get pulled over and I'm sober, but an officer and his canine buddy smell the ounce of super skunk I've got in my trunk? And the police response is, under state law, officers have to develop probable cause to search a closed or locked container. Each case stands on its own, but the smell of pot alone will not be reason to search a vehicle. Let me underline that. The smell of pot alone will not be reason to search a vehicle. If officers have information that you're trafficking, producing, or delivering marijuana in violation of state law, they can get a warrant to search your vehicle, which they would have to do now anyway. They would have had it done before 502 if they thought they would have to have got that probable cause. But the fact that the smell of pot by a canine dog is no longer probable cause is one of the biggest parts of this electoral victory. Now, they continue on this post, Martinelli also mentioned in numerous fear-mongering posts that he put up that Washington would only be left with a decriminalized ounce and a small amount of other cannabis-infused products, which dismisses the huge victory in winning the right to possess a pound of cannabis-infused solids and a 6-pack of cannabis-infused liquids, especially when the Seattle Police Department blotter says this. Beginning December 6th, it is not a violation of state law for adults over 21 years old to possess up to an ounce of marijuana or 16 ounces of solid marijuana-infused product like cookies or 72 ounces of liquid-infused product like oil for personal use. Did you just recognize that the Seattle Police Department accepts 2 1/4 quarts of hash oil as being legal to possess for personal use? And if I'm not mistaken, regular old hash is a marijuana-infused solid, which Washingtonians can now have a pound of? I don't know who Anthony Martinelli is hanging out with, but in my crowd, a pound of hash and over a half gallon of hash oil is not a small amount. To wind this up, another one of the fears was, oh, sure, you'll be able to have your ounce, but if you can't prove that you got it from a state store, it'll be illegal. And they'll enjoin the state stores. There'll be no state stores. There'll be no place to get a legal ounce. And since there's no stores to get a legal ounce in, you'll be busted, right? That was another one of the fears we heard. Well, this is straight from the Seattle Police Department, where they ask, well, where can I legally buy pot then? And the Seattle Police Department says, the Washington State Liquor Control Board is working to establish guidelines for the sale and distribution of marijuana. The board has until December 1st, 2013 to finalize those rules. In the meantime, production and distribution of non-medical marijuana remains illegal. Note that they didn't include possession of non-medical marijuana in that sentence. Many of that No on I-502 crowd warned you that you would never get to possess an ounce of marijuana since there'd be no legal store to buy it from. Well, according to the Seattle Police Department, that doesn't seem to matter. Again, beginning December 6th, it is not a violation of state law for adults over 21 years old to possess up to an ounce of marijuana or 16 ounces of marijuana-infused solids like cookies or 72 ounces of marijuana-infused liquids like oil. Now, speaking of December 6th and legally possessing oil, we are working on plans to bring to you the very first legal dab in Washington State. live here on RadicalRuss.com. We're either going to go across the river to Vancouver or we're going to take the train up to Seattle and set some sort of remote up. But our idea right now, me and Ganja John are working on this, is to provide a live show midnight Pacific time, December 6th. So it'd be Wednesday night, midnight, right? December 6th, when we legally have the right to possess those items. We're going to do the first legal dabs right here on the Russ Belville Show with Ganja John, Cannabis Cup winner Ganja John, and Cascadia Concentrates. Stay tuned for more information about that. Well, goodness. It's 20 after, man.
Oh my gosh. I'm just so damn excited. And I think I have the perfect location that we can do this midnight dab party.
Oh, we shall talk about that.
Have you ever met that
Right back.
funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information. Michael Phelps, Olympic superstar, 14 gold medals, world record holder. So much for that amotivational syndrome.
Back to everybody, and just a quick mention of our good friend Lively Libra, who's been a longtime supporter of the show and for whom this radio automation software, the Libramator, is named after. She got outed as one of our supporters, and she is a school teacher in Iowa, so this is causing some problems for her. She might be away from the chat room for a while, but she says she is going to fight for her constitutional right to fight for medical marijuana as a glaucoma patient. This might go to the Supreme Court, people, so we will keep you posted. But just keep Lively Libra in your thoughts and help her any way you can.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Electric Tuesday, featuring the latest in electronic dance music and other cutting-edge genres. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 23 after the hour, and for our Electric Tuesday Daily Toker Tunes today, I'm going to give something to the nerds out there, the geeks, the sci-fi fans, because, you know, amongst the cannabis community, there are a few of us. Just a little bit.
Indeed.
Indeedly doodly. And, of course, the big news for all the sci-fi geeks in the past couple weeks was the sale of Lucasfilm, Star Wars, the whole franchise, from George Lucas to Disney.
I've got your now, Vader.
So we've got that's one of the big things that's going on right now, and of course all the big photoshops came up immediately, all the memes of the Death Star with Mickey ears and all.
Oh well, they've had the Vader helmet with Mickey ears for quite some time.
Oh really?
Now. Yeah, I've seen that like a couple years ago. So I guess they saw the future coming. Shudder.
Yeah, so we're all kind of anticipating. Of course, they're also talking about now going forth with the third trilogy.
Yeah, the 7, 8, and 9. It was dreaded.
We shall see what happens. But I don't know that it could be any worse than the 1, 2, and 3.
Well, apparently one of the animators from Pixar who did, I think, the Toy Story movies, is on to help with the either the script or the animation or something.
Let's hope somebody helps.
It's a sad day. Yeah, the Death Star just cried.
Well, in lieu of that, in honor of this story with Lucasfilm, I decided to go back looking through the archives to see if we could find some music for Electric Tuesday that would fit. Right now, I've got some Star Trek tunes. We had that Never Trust a Klingon tune that we got, and there's a Dr. McCoy song that we played. I love
the Dr. McCoy.
But I was thinking, do we have anything for Star Wars? And I looked through the archives, and I did not find anything. But
you went to the Google?
I went to the Google. Actually, I went even better. I went to Melody Sheep, and if you follow the show, Melody Sheep does all those remixes of. He did the Symphony of Science, and then he's got 3 of them that he did for PBS, which are the Julia Child, the Bob Ross, and the Mr. Rogers. He did the remix of Bruce Lee. Well, here's the latest. It's
I'm
Yoda.
not looking for a friend. I'm looking for a Jedi Master.
Oh yes.
Jedi Master, Yoda. You seek Yoda.
Yoda.
Clear your mind of questions. You must unlearn what you have learned. The Jedi strength flows from the Force. That is the way of things. For my ally is Force, and the powerful ally it is. Its energy surrounds, and binds us. Luminous beam, Zoe. Not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Between you, me, for my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Its energy surrounds, and binds us. Excitement. A Jedi craves not these things. For 800 years have I trained Jedi. A Jedi strength flows from the Force. Luminous beam, Zoe. Not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Between you, me, between. Feel the Force. Feel the Force. Feel the Force around you. Feel the Force unlearn what you have learned. Only a pre-trained Jedi with the Force as his ally will conquer Vader if you choose the quick and easy path. You will become an agent of evil. Luminous beam, Zoe. Not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Between you, me, between. Will I rest? Yes, forever sleep. Twilight is upon me. Soon light must fall.
I like it like that.
Well, I don't know what you came to do, but what we came to keep the funk alive.
That's right, baby. We're keeping the funk alive right here at Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Rink, your groovy home of soul, funk, and disco. So join me, Big Daddy, every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific at the Funky Roller Rink, where every night is Saturday night.
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while and share.
Cause the day was hard and your work was long and you need a break from all the that's wrong. You better look at the clock, cause it's 4:19. Time to reach in that pocket for your bag of green and smoke that weed.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show. The cannabis community includes a diverse set of activists and nonprofits working to end the prohibition of marijuana. We take the time to hear the stories of reform on the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Community Chat.
Welcome back, and as long as I've been covering this issue, one of the most frustrating parts about it has been having people take it seriously. Seems anytime it comes up in the media or I mention to people that I'm working in marijuana law reform, it either gets demeaned or laughed at. Don't you have anything more important to work on? My God, there's AIDS and there's starvation and there's war and so forth. And the other side of it, of course, is the pot puns. We see this whenever marijuana legalization or medical thing fails. They'll say measure goes up in smoke, supporters lost in a cloud of haze, etc. There's always some sort of joke to come up with it. So I was very, very proud to watch this Friday night on Real Time with Bill Maher, Mason Tvert, who's the co-director of the legalization campaign that succeeded in Colorado. Now, just that Thursday, just the day before, I had been at a party with Mason Thursday night, just sitting there. He was sipping a beer. We were hanging out talking about that. The very next day, he's on a flight to LA, appearing on Real Time with Bill Maher. If you didn't get a chance to see it, they had it linked up at the Weed blog. It's been taken down now, but you might be able to find it out there somewhere. But he appeared on there, and he was in that segment where you get to do the one-on-one, just not the panel section, but just the one-on-one section. And Bill Maher essentially guaranteed campaign funding for marijuana legalization in 2014 if Mason would move to California and direct the campaign. It was just amazing. He said it twice, so it looks pretty good, and we'll talk about that more in the next segment. But there's another segment of Real Time that appears only online, and it's called Overtime. And Mason takes one of the questions from the interview that says, do you have a timeline in mind for winning national legalization, winning legalization at the national level? And some great reactions there from The Daily Show, Jon Stewart and others on this marijuana legalization. And again, it's something I've brought up many times, is how we can't have this discussion so long as the media is going to continue to treat it as something silly, as something that's not worthy of discussion. So as we move forward here with 2 states that have legalized, it's important that we continue to point out what the problem is. And it's not how great legalization may turn out to be. It's how awful prohibition is. The first thing that we saw from Washington State passing its legalization with I-502 is the prosecutors in King, Pierce, and Clark counties dropping their marijuana possession cases. Last I heard it was 220 cases. 220 cases that have been dropped. 220 people who will no longer face being a criminal and having a criminal record for the rest of their life. That is a tangible result from ending marijuana prohibition. These are the stories that we have to highlight to show people that it's not just, woo, I'm going to smoke a lot of weed tonight, which I'm glad that Jon Stewart showed that guy. It does show kind of the perception that we labor under. But remember that as marijuana has been prohibited, it's only been that tip of the iceberg that can even talk about marijuana. Now that it's legal, and this is why it's such a game changer, and why I said leading up to this election, there's nothing more important than that headline, pot's legal, marijuana's legal. Nothing more important than that. Everything else is a detail that we can work out, but it changes the tone of the debate. We've got Latin American leaders from Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Costa Rica calling on our government to end marijuana prohibition. We have got the representatives from the state of Colorado going to the government asking for an exception to the Controlled Substances Act. We've got Governor Chris Gregoire in Washington State and Governor John Hickenlooper in Colorado already meeting with the Department of Justice to find out what their priorities are going to be in the enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act. And right here in Oregon, where marijuana legalization didn't even pass, the effect of passing marijuana legalization has forced our state's largest newspaper, The Oregonian, and by the way, I was in a meeting today with all the leaders of Oregon marijuana reform, and Paul Stanford was there and brought out a very good point. This is the Oregonian's editorial board, the conservative paper in the state of Oregon, calling on the legislature to go forth with a plan for legalizing marijuana, when back in the 80s and 90s, the Oregonian was getting prizes from the ONDCP for their coverage of the Faces of Meth. Remember the Faces of Meth ad campaign and how much the Oregonian did investigation on that? They were getting kudos and awards from the ONDCP, from the Drug Czar's office, and now even they are calling for marijuana legalization because they can feel that tide, that flow of money, talent, and resources that are going to go across the Columbia River. Fully half of the people in the state of Oregon now live within 1 hour's drive of legal marijuana, and you can bet they're going to be headed there to enjoy some of that freedom. And we have the pressure on them right now. We have the pressure on them right now to show that the tide of public opinion's in our favor, and if the legislature doesn't do it, we are going to do it. So things are looking positive here in Oregon and all around the United States. And when we come back, we're going to take a look in the Radical Rant as to which state will legalize marijuana next. It's going to be out west? Is there a surprise out east? Maybe some Midwestern actions? Stay tuned. You get my thoughts on that and more here on the Russ Belville Show.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. NORMAL stands for responsible adult cannabis use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Our marijuana laws are terribly unfair, and they make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges, and we are unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They are average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. And it's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORMAL, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Well, it's been kind of a whirlwind week for me, I gotta tell you. The middle of which, on Wednesday last week, I woke up in the morning smoking a wake and bake legal joint in Seattle, and then I went to bed Wednesday night smoking a legal joint in Denver. It's a day that I never thought I would live to see. And now I'm home updating all the charts and the tables and the audio for the show to reflect the fact that now 1 out of 26 Americans lives where there is a legal right to possess and use marijuana. Isn't that amazing? Yes. Fantastic. So election night in Seattle was pretty electric. I was at the hotel where New Approach Washington had set up to watch the returns come in, anchoring coverage there while Kerry covered the party in Denver. As the polls closed in Colorado at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I was the first to relay the news to the Washington reformers that Colorado had just become the first state to legalize marijuana. I couldn't even hear Kerry over the din of the celebration coming across her feed. Yet the reaction to that news, while positive, was hardly overwhelming. It was great that Colorado won, and it heightened the anticipation among I-502 supporters that their initiative would win as well. But it seemed to me like most of the people, not the young volunteers, but most of the people in New Approach Washington's party perceived Colorado's legalization as their win as a separate campaign and not our win as a nation of cannabis consumers. And I just couldn't shake that strange feeling. And maybe a part of that was the fact that since I'd arrived on the Amtrak from Portland, I hadn't smoked any marijuana that day. Election day, I really hadn't smoked any pot. So here I was, just an hour away from Washington State, finding out whether or not they legalized pot, and just learning that Colorado has legalized pot, and there's not a speck of pot to be found anywhere near me. It was very weird. I mean, am I such a pothead that going without a day makes me suspicious? But my unease was kind of confirmed as I chatted with the Canadians. I was fortunate enough to be working the media alongside the irrepressible Jody Emery, along with Jeremiah and the crew from Pot TV. I met attorney Kirk Toussaint, who I'd appreciated as an ally online when we debunked Stoners Against Legalization from Prop 19 back in 2010. And Kirk put it best. You know what would be different about a marijuana legalization vote in BC? We'd be smoking weed. Well, soon enough, KIRO-TV was calling the win for Washington's legalization. There was much rejoicing as campaign director Allison Holcomb and proponent Rick Steves addressed the media. I continued wrapping up the coverage of election night and ending with the unfortunate loss of my own home state of Oregon. My friends Herb and Iko were live at the Cannabis Cafe in Portland, where the mood was still positive, reflecting on the fact that our super liberal legalization measure, with no money and no high-profile support, did as well as California's Prop 19, with its 5x5 gardens and 1-ounce limits. So as the evening wrapped up, I ended up at Allison Holcomb's hotel suite, where they were having a party along with Rick Steves and most of the I-502 campaigners, and Jody Emery and the Canadians were there as well. That's a great band name, isn't it? There on the table was bottle after bottle of ethanol. Up till tonight, the only legal recreational drug in Washington State. There was tequila and vodka, gin, rum, wine, beer, and more, and as I looked about the room, just about everybody had some form of alcohol in their hand. But not a single joint, pipe, bong, chillum, vapor pen, or even a pot-laced brownie to be found. Well, luckily, Jody and the Canadians abducted me from that party, sensing the same feeling I had, that we were pot aficionados stuck in an alcohol party. And that's the difference between the chaos and madness I could hear on Kerry's feed over the legalization in Colorado and the good-natured celebration over legalization in Washington. Our party kind of felt like a family celebrating their oldest son's graduation at the top of his medical school class. Colorado party felt like the Rebel Alliance just blew up the Death Star. Now, later that night, the Canadians and I did manage to finally end up with that feeling of personal victory more than political victory. We managed to even score some junk food to make the first few hours of Washington State's legalization even more authentic. Then I caught the train to Portland the next day for a 3-hour layover before catching a plane to Denver for the National Marijuana Business Conference. There, entrepreneurs were spending $500 apiece to learn from growers and dispensary operators and activists and lawyers how to position themselves for the green rush that's coming to Colorado. Over the Thursday and Friday I was there, you could feel legality in the air. Pot smokers stood outside the venue right alongside tobacco smokers, right there on the sidewalk in downtown Denver in broad daylight. We got word that the National Football League and Major League Baseball were warning the players from the Broncos and the Rockies in Colorado and the Seahawks and the Mariners out there in Washington that the law changes nothing about their collective bargaining agreements that forbid and test for marijuana use. We even heard that ski resorts in Colorado, especially the effectively already legal Breckenridge, started talking about ski and toke vacations where an ounce of marijuana will be waiting for you at the lodge. And, of course, that beer tycoon governor warned the potheads not to break out the Cheetos and Goldfish just yet because marijuana is federally illegal. Now, Thursday night, I spoke with Mason Tvert, who was nursing a beer while indoors at the National Cannabis Industries Association party. The next day, he was on a flight to Los Angeles to appear on Bill Maher's show. Now, understand that Bill Maher had famously given $1 million to Paul Begala's think tank to help push for Obama's reelection this year. So when Mason brought that up and suggested that Maher and 20 of his friends could put up some money to get it legalized in California, Maher didn't flinch and guaranteed twice that if Mason moved to California, Maher would give him money. So, if you're going to ask me which state's going to legalize next, it looks to me as if California is on the fast track to marijuana legalization in 2014. But don't discount Oregon. Our state's largest newspaper is calling on our legislature, of all things, to legalize and regulate marijuana on the threat that Portland taxes, talent, revenue, and jobs, and medical marijuana protection money for that matter, are going to be lost across the Columbia River to Vancouver. And if they don't act, our activists are sure to keep bringing back better funded legalization efforts that may be more liberal than what the legislature would approve. Now, the national leaders that I spoke to in Denver urged Oregon's activists to wait until the presidential election year of 2016. But I think that legislative push, along with the gubernatorial race that we got in 2014, could make 2014 a viable year for Oregon. Now, for an Eastern shot at legalization, I'd bet on Massachusetts for 2016. They decriminalized personal possession back in 2008, and this election, the voters approved medical marijuana by a 63% vote. But what got lost in all this national dialogue about the two states that legalized was the fact that they took votes this year in Massachusetts on what they call non-binding public policy questions. These votes were taken in 166 townships and districts on the question that asked, should the state representative from this district be instructed to vote in favor of legislation that would allow the state to regulate and tax marijuana in the same manner of alcohol? And the people overwhelmingly won that vote in every city and town that voted in Massachusetts to tell their representatives to vote yes on marijuana legalization. So I would look very strongly at Massachusetts in 2016. And if I can dream a little, I believe that the re-election of Barack Obama is going to hasten this timetable a bit. We've got a decision coming from the appeals court on that ASA versus DEA case to reschedule marijuana to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3. And that would give the government kind of a face-saving way out of total marijuana prohibition, allowing the states to follow their own path to legalization. Plus, there's still some discomfort among the DOJ among that Fast and Furious scandal. I think that's what kept the DOJ, by the way, to not come out strongly against legalization. And I think it's also going to kind of hold them at bay a little bit with Washington and Colorado. And then, of course, there's always the increasing politics of this issue. It's becoming increasingly popular, and the young, progressive, and minority voters the Democrats need to hang on to, they're going to want to make sure not to offend any of them, especially as the GOP, the smarter members of the Republican Party, that is, figure out why they lost in 2012 and that their party cannot just cater to rich white people, rich white men anymore. When they start to realize what an electoral bounty they could get by supporting marijuana legalization, doing something that's popular with the people, something that fits their conservative worldview of states' rights, individual responsibility, limited government, ending wasteful government spending. It's such a natural, young, conservative issue that I can't not see the GOP jumping to that issue come 2016. So I think on both sides of the aisle, there's some fear about going too strongly against Washington and Colorado's legalization, especially as large a margin as they both passed. The Colorado legalization measure, last I checked, was passed by something like 9.8% between yes and no, and Washington was over 10%, 10.14 or something like that. Those are huge victories in electoral politics, and don't think that the policymakers out there and the politicians out there don't recognize that. Now, as far as moving forward here in the state of Oregon, like I said, I mentioned I was at a meeting today that featured many leaders from the Oregon reform organizations, and there's good and bad to report from this. Everyone's eager to move forward with a legislative action. The feeling being that you can spend money on a lobbyist and not have to spend as much as you would have to spend on a statewide petition and legalization campaign. So if we can get the support in the legislature, that sounds to me like the logical thing to do. The only fear that I have is it seems that once again, the balkanization that has always existed in the Oregon legalization movement is going to continue. That we're going to have this group go to this legislature and that group go to that legislator and this group go with this language and that group go with that language. And once again, we'll be portraying ourselves as a scattered, disorganized, unserious, non-professional effort to legalize marijuana. We've got to do something about that. I feel that is the number one thing that has to be addressed in Oregon. We've got to find a way to legalize marijuana despite our own efforts sometimes. And part of the problem that exists in this, if you'll excuse me, is a continued refusal to address some realities in the world, some things that are just realities of politics. One of which, I was sitting by someone today who was talking about how, marijuana should be legal for people 18 and older, since people aged 18 can fight in wars and die for their country and vote for president. And I completely agree. I am philosophically 100% behind an 18-year-old limit for marijuana legalization. But I live in the real political world, and I know that 18 is never going to pass. You're not going to pass an 18-year-old limit when the parents know that some of their 18-year-olds are still in high school and some of their younger kids are in high school with 18-year-olds. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get marijuana more legal than alcohol. Other concerns is not recognizing some of the lessons from this campaign cycle. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the very definition of insanity, according to Albert Einstein. And we've got to end this. We've got to find a way to get through this and not have our efforts hamstrung by too many of us out there trying to pursue different agendas and different language. Everybody needs to get on the same page, especially if the goal is to go forward in 2014. We've been told in no uncertain terms by big national funders that they will not support anything that goes forward in 2014. If that's the case, then reformers in Oregon have to get all their ducks in a row, because all the odds will be stacked against them once again in the money department. And as earnest and forthright and volunteering as everyone was with Measure 80, it was its lack of big funding that killed it. We got 47% almost with the little funding that we had. And people are saying that if we'd have had more money, we could definitely have won it. But that, if I had the magic power to fill in black ovals with my mind, we would have won it. You can say if all you like. The big money wasn't there. And if the big money's not there, we can't pass something. At least that's what's been proven so far. Maybe this changes in the next 2 years. Maybe with Washington State having legalization, people get less afraid of it. Maybe even the most liberal thing can pass in 2014. I'm behind anything as long as there's one thing to get behind. I'm not interested in following multiple cars in the rally race anymore. I want us all on one bus with one direction and one goal. If we can't do that, Oregon's doomed to failure in 2014 once again. Well, there I am, Captain Buzzkill. But we'll take this into hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. You can call in at 971-533-7111 if you have comments or questions. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you